let's talk about algae then, just for a little bit. David was telling us backstage that, and I missed this, that President Obama mentioned algae in a recent speech, apparently in Florida, and people laughed as he included that as part of the future picture. Why do people laugh? What's your experience with that? And I really wanted to know, kind of give us some applications from algae, kind of as you're in your company, and more generally as you see algae is going to be applied here and then here and then here, kind of in order of sequence of where it's going to be most useful or have the best market first.
All right, so let me try to answer the Obama question first, then I'll break it down chronologically on the algae development phases. First with Obama, look, he got stuck in the middle of a bipartisan fight, and he came out there and said that we could fuel our cars with algae, and I think enough of the market either doesn't know anything about algae or knows enough to know that it's very far down the road before we're actually fueling vehicles with algae oil, 5, 10 years down the road. So from a government politics perspective, it was just I wish he didn't say it, frankly, because it only adds more credibility issues to our industry. We don't count on the government. I've been in the renewable energy space for about 12 years, energy space for 20 years, and I've just learned to not count on the government for anything. I don't think they'll ever get it right. The only thing that would ever help our industry develop sustainable technologies is a long-term policy, and they just don't think that way. And it's only gotten worse in the last 4 years. So to bring it up in a presidential election year is probably very poor timing. The second question regarding the chronological steps to algae development, at least in our perspective as a company, is you want to start on the higher value ends. That's why we put transportation fuels, jet fuels, diesel, all these things we make every day at our facility, but we aren't going to make them at market cost. And our business concept is $80 barrel oil. If we have to produce fuel at the base rate of $80 barrel oil equivalent, and if we can't, we're not going to go into that market. But what we can do is chase products that are out there today that have higher value. And those examples of products chronologically in our perspective are fertilizer, food and feeds, aquaculture feeds, cattle feeds, poultry and hogs. Those things are happening right now. Dog foods, dog and cat foods. Obviously with our investors, we do have insight others probably don't have readily available. But as well, you'll see pharmaceuticals, nutraceuticals. I just saw for my first time yesterday at CVS. I live in a small town in Colorado, so I don't get to these big drugstores very often. I was at CVS here in Laguna, and they're selling an algae oil-based omega-3. Well, that's excellent to see, because the way we get omega-3s right now is through fish oil, and the only way you get fish oil is by crushing small fish, which is completely unsustainable. You cannot continue to do that. So to actually see that coming on the market, it's a market that's expanding. The fish get the omega-3s from eating algae. We're just taking out the middleman, middle fish. So it's an important step that's coming. These markets are going to open up, and that's what I see. In the short term, I'm talking the next 3 years, this is happening. I'm watching it. Fertilizers are going out there. You're going to see aquaculture feeds change. Think about the aquaculture market. I think it was Craig Ventnor was talking about it. That salmon, and this is true, because we're testing salmon at our site. We're doing these feed trials. Salmon that eat soybean and corn for protein do not have the same protein amino acid profile as the salmon that you get when you catch one in Alaska. So pretty soon, your protein content that you're getting off the salmon, which is supposed to be your safer protein, is not going to be that much better than eating a piece of beef. You might have a lower fat content, but the actual amino acid profile, the nutrients you need, aren't going to be there. So you need to find these other technologies. They take time, but chronologically, that's what I buy. I'll take the fertilizer. And we're doing it. We're selling fertilizer. We are selling omega-3s, and we are selling feeds.
And in the meantime, people need to buy salmon that's in the wild.
Yeah.
There's a transition, and all this stuff takes time. And that's the problem with both hydrogen and algae and any of these sustainable technologies. Man, these things take time.
So let's talk about that a little bit, because one of the things that you did when you were up here as a fire starter is that you ran very quickly by your financial backing from the Mars family, Mars company, and mentioned that they take a very long-term view, 25 and 100 years, which was pretty impressive. And I think you mentioned that they see 4 major areas of interest
Yep.
for them, and I wondered if you would repeat those.
All right, so what they do in these periods, about every 10 years, they get together and ask large questions about what happens in a 25-year or 100-year look ahead, because they're looking at a $30 billion a year enterprise that sells globally, 70 countries, and how do they continue that growth that they've seen over the last 20 years? So their question in 2006 was, one, how do you feed 9 billion people? Because that's coming. I mean, we're not going to stop that. There's going to be 9 billion people out there. There's 7 today. The other thing is, I believe, as well as the Mars family believes, we've already passed a tipping point. I mean, what Jim was saying last night, my wife and I went back to the room, he was so right. It's so obvious, and he's giving us illustrative examples of it. It just amazes me that not more of this world, and I don't mean to be preaching here, so forgive me, but that more people don't recognize that. People aren't acting upon it. But anyway, the question was, how do you diminish the amount of carbon dioxide going into the atmosphere? We are past the tipping point. We have affected our environment, okay? It's just how much farther are we going to go? And then the third question was water resources, potable water, okay? There's a lot of water, but potable water, there isn't. It's not everywhere you need it. So how do you manage water resources for industry and people? And then the fourth wrap-up question to that is, it is human nature to want to expand macroeconomically. Every country in the world wants to improve their economy. Everybody wants to improve their lifestyle, their quality of life for their children and their children's children. How do you do that sustainably? Because we're not doing it today. And more people need to understand that. So those were the four big ones.
Quick question for Dan. I keep hearing people talk about hydrogen from algae. Is there anything to that?
We have a couple scientists who have done some research projects on it. One's written a white paper, but we are not targeting that effort. Our challenge right now is staying focused.
Thank you.